And testing. Okay, cool. Okay, so Corin on the road has taken Corin's world into his chat area, and this is going to be a fun one. A lot to unpack. I'm very excited. I have, last week we did my father-in-law, but this week I had to step my game up a little bit and bring my father, Steven, into Corin's world for a chat. So, wanted to welcome you, Dad, to the channel, and have you been watching? And if so, what have been your thoughts on the channel? And am I making you proud?
You always make me proud, whether you're on YouTube or not. And I think you're doing a great job, actually. You have an interesting mix. You had Jed, your older brother. You had your kid sister.
Yep.
And you had friends.
Let's settle this. Who had a better chat, Jed or Davina?
Don't put me in that position. I have to live with all you guys.
Yep.
But I'm proud of all of you guys. You know that.
Yeah. No, I mean, so something that you had mentioned when I first started doing the channel was, I had all my friends on and they were young and they have their take. And you had mentioned that the channel needed a little bit more of an older generation, some more, elderly voices on there to be heard. So what exactly do you mean by, the older generation when you said that type of comment? What is it with the older generation that maybe specifically has more knowledge or experience? Speak to, someone saying, respect your elders, or you need an elder voice to be heard.
Well, that's a good question, Corin. I think the older generation has a different perspective on what life is like in general. And for instance, I don't get the whole reality TV business. I know it's very popular with the younger generation. I remember you guys watching, what was that show? Jersey Shore, I think.
Oh, we didn't. We weren't living like all together when Jersey Shore was on, but I mean that was a popular show for kids my age.
But I remember one of you guys would be watching it. You kind of like, I just remember. Well, shows like that. I mean, whether you watch it or not, it's just so persuasive. It's so ubiquitous on TV. I mean, wherever you look, there's a reality show.
Yep.
The Kardashians. I don't know. There's that. It's June and it's hot. Who the heavy woman with the
Honey
very
Boo Boo
heavy
Child?
daughter? Yeah, honey. I mean, who watches this? I mean, is it very young kids or is it teenagers? I don't get it. But anyway, I'm digressing. The whole upbringing of kids today is different. When I brought Jed to my old neighborhood, I'm a product of the Bronx.
Yep, Bronx.
Born and raised. And we didn't have this whole concept of doing things that involved parents, to be driven, even to take a school bus. Everything from the time we left house, we were on our own. We went to school on our own, walking to elementary school. I was never on a school bus in my life. Later on, it was subway to high school. And after we got home from school, we just go outside and meet up with our friends, and we did our own thing. So the whole thing of, and we didn't have cell phones, by the way.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
We sat around. No one was looking at cell phones.
Yep.
We all interacted with each other. And politically speaking, I'm just going through a whole gamut of things. I don't think we were as politically aware as the younger generation. And kudos to the younger generation for being very aware.
Yep.
I mean, there's people that are Bernie fans that like, he's a movie star.
Yeah.
We didn't really get involved, even though we could vote. I don't remember, or remember my friends being involved and having discussions about who's running in the primary and, who might be president. It was just not our thing.
Yeah.
And we're also a product of the Cold War.
Well, let me ask you a question before you get into all this. So you mentioned the reality television shows that, a lot of us tend to watch now. And I had this discussion with Molly on Molly's Mind where she'd mentioned, and Molly reads, she's very educated, I respect her opinion, if she wants to find out about something, she'll research it, and she'll get multiple sources, she won't just trust one. But to that point, she has her weakness with the Kardashian show. And something that she says, the reason she watches it is just because sometimes it's just mindless TV. And we watch these things to take our mind away from work or, stresses we're having maybe with the family or something like that. So because, I know you as my father, but I've never really gotten too in depth with you on you as a kid and your friends as well. What was your mindless television sort of say when you were a kid? I'm sure school got stressful. I'm sure you got fed up with your parents. And, yes, you can get out in the streets and play stickball with your friends or something. But there had to be something, something that, was sort of your Kardashian, so to speak, that you did to clear your mind. What do kids do?
That's a good point, and I have to think about that for a minute. It certainly wasn't TV.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I was growing up, we had, 2, 4, 5, 7. We had maybe 7 channels on the TV.
Yeah.
That was it.
But
TV,
but you guys did at certain points, and there's iconic photos of families gathering around the TV station for the Dick Van Dyke Show or whatever the hell came on. I Love Lucy. So when that show came on, you guys did huddle around the TV and watch it all together, right? It was like must-watch
yes.
TV.
Good point. You bring up a memory,
mm-hmm.
but it wasn't a 7-day-a-week thing. It was Tuesday night, I remember,
mm-hmm.
and it was the Milton Berle hour. Milton Berle was the TV show of the day. Mm-hmm. This was the late 50s.
Yep.
And we did sit around as a family.
Mm-hmm.
Our first TV was it was like an 8-inch Dumont. And I remember my father had bought a magnifying glass. They actually sold them for little TVs. Mm-hmm. This big bubble that you would put up on the screen that made it bigger. And Tuesday night was the Milton Berle night. But other than that, TV did not play a role in our life. Mm-hmm. What we did as kids was always hanging out with other friends until it got dark. Mm-hmm. We came home from school, and then we would just go out and hang out. I grew up in Parkchester.
Yep.
A big housing project in the Bronx that was divided up into quadrants, and we hung out in the West Quadrant. And that's whenever you went, no matter what hour, there were always friends there.
Yeah.
And we were big on sports.
Mm-hmm.
Organized sports was a very big thing in my growing up. Parkchester itself had their own recreation people mm-hmm. that ran their own leagues, mm-hmm. softball leagues, basketball leagues, that everyone played in. And then besides that, we had Little League. And in those days, it wasn't like today where everyone plays Little League. In my day, you had to try out for Little League. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people didn't make Little League. You actually had tryouts. And if you didn't make it, they'll say to you, well, we'll see you next season. Mm-hmm. No one cried. No one ran home to mommy and complained. It was just a fact of life. I'm not putting down the younger generation for all the medals mm-hmm. that kids get for participation nowadays. But we didn't have that. So going back to your point about what we did as a family, we all ate dinner together. And that's true of me as well as my friend's family.
Yeah, and you brought that tradition to us as well. This is something that you stressed in our family growing up, was that we'd always, either sit in the living room or at the table, but we had dinner together.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Now it's different. But especially when I was growing up, my father came home from work. That's when we had dinner. Mm-hmm. After dinner, I did my homework, and that was like kind of it,
So was that something when you were a kid? Did you sort of make a mental note of that as a kid? Like, hey, I appreciate this time with my family, sitting at the table with my brother and my mom and my dad, that sort of as you got older stuck with you, that when you had kids, you were going to implement that in? Because this is something that I'm figuring out now too, is almost just like, I have a memory bank of everything we did as kids. And it's almost like I try to reach back and it's like, that worked, that didn't work. I'm going to implement that. I'm going to not implement that. Did you realize things as you were a kid that you appreciated and didn't appreciate your parents doing?
In retrospect, at the time, probably not. Mm-hmm. But when you look back in retrospect, yeah, I mean, I remember things that my parents would do that at the time I didn't want to do.
Hmm.
Going over to an aunt's house. Oh, are we going over to Aunt Sally's house again? Where she doesn't let me sit on the couch because she thinks I'm going to fart and,
Yeah.
do something. But you look back in retrospect, family became very important to me.
Hmm.
I envy your mom because she's close to her family.
Hmm.
And oh, that was a bug I just ran across. I come from a large family. My mother had 6 brothers and 4 sisters.
Hmm.
So I got a zillion cousins, of which I'm in contact with maybe 3 today, and not even close. So family, in retrospect, became very important to me. And I liked when there were family things that we did together
Yep.
with family. At the time, I'm repeating, at the time, it was not important to me. But then as you grow older, other things become more important. Again, in the late 50s, it was the Cold War, which I don't want to minimize because as tense as things are now with what's going on in the country, during the Cold War, we used to have duck and cover drills. It was just part of being in school, where the teacher would yell duck and cover, and we would duck under our desks.
Well, I mean, your Cold War, and it was probably similar to our school shootings now, or something like that. Like there's a way to, like a drill that goes with it.
Yeah, except a school shooting, I guess, is terrifying.
Yeah, of course.
But we're talking about nuclear war.
Yeah,
We're talking about being nuked.
I mean,
And that's what those
that
are.
is still a possibility today with North Korea potentially doing whatever the hell they're going to do.
Well, not like it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and
Yeah.
all, where we really thought there was Armageddon.
Let me ask one more question.
But then, as we grew,
I just sorry, go keep going.
no, as we grow older, other things start taking on importance. Was in my day was the Vietnam War. All through college was the Vietnam War. Every night on the TV you would see the war. They would have a body count on the news every night.
Yeah, I mean,
the
it was very
Americans-
strong-sided both ways. I mean, there's people like Jane Fonda or Muhammad Ali that took big stands.
Oh, absolutely.
Right or
What I'm
wrong.
trying to bring out is, that this did play on the mind. This was our discussions. Earlier on, we didn't talk politics, but then, later in high school and certainly in college, this was the all-encompassing thing.
But you wouldn't have where would you have conversations with people? Would it just be strictly at school and at home? I mean, could you find out if someone had so I had mentioned Jane Fonda, Muhammad Ali. A lot of people disagreed with Jane Fonda. I don't know too much about it, but she had a strong stance against the war, and a lot of people, didn't agree with her about that. How would you find out if someone, agreed with her but wouldn't really say that in public? Where were those conversations happening?
Boy, that's a really good point you brought up. I unlike today, I think in those days, it took a lot of guts to publicly say that you were against the war. I mean, it's not like today where people, truly have no problem in expressing their emotions.
Yep.
But in my day, yeah, there were big protests. I mean, there were campus protests. But early on, before all that started, it was just something that you discussed amongst your friends. Oh, am I going to get drafted? The draft didn't start until I'm not even sure, probably mid 60s is when the draft started, or the early 60s.
Yeah.
So that became an issue.
I want to stop you there because I'm very interested in the whole drafting process, and this is something that I can't even, I mean, you're my father, you know me, you've seen me cry, you've seen me happy. I consider myself a pretty big wimp, and, I have a lot of respect for people that, go into the military service and all this stuff. What was the process when you were a teenager of the whole drafting situation? Was it were you nervous? Like, it was a guarantee you were going to have to go into some service force, whether it's Army,
Well,
Marines.
not necessarily.
Okay.
That's why it was considered the minority war, because uh, the draft was set up. Once the draft started, it was set up where if you were a college student, you were automatically exempt.
Oh, well.
At least while you're in college.
Okay. Yep.
Once you graduated from college, then you did become eligible.
Hmm.
And then there were, so anyone who wasn't in the university, which were a lot of the minorities in the country, they were subject to the draft.
Hmm.
But then I'll give you a personal, when I was in college, I knew I wasn't going to be drafted.
Hmm.
But once I graduated from college, and you were also deferred if you were a teacher.
Oh, okay.
So that eliminated a lot of the minorities as well.
Well, because minorities were teachers? What do you mean?
No. They were the ones who were being drafted because they weren't in college and they weren't teachers.
Okay. Yeah.
So they were not exempt from the draft.
Yeah, yeah.
You understand?
Yep.
But then when those deferments ran out, they were called deferments. You were deferred while you were in college. You were deferred if you were teaching.
Hmm.
But if you weren't teaching and you weren't in college, then you were eligible for the draft. Be that as it may, going back to your original question about talking against it,
Hmm.
in the beginning, before it really became a bloody mess, we were there as advisors. But then I guess around 64, 65 was when it really started building up, to hundreds of thousands of GIs. And that's when the big demonstration started, the draft card burning. And that's going back to Jane Fonda. What put her in the limelight was that she actually made a trip to North Vietnam and sat on a tank and talked against the war. And this, in the eyes of Americans, including myself, just thought this is something you don't do.
Yeah.
It's one thing on a college campus, to burn your draft card. And then you had the Kent State shootings where the National Guard fired upon some students and killed several students at Kent State University. So that's when the Vietnam War was a turning point in everybody's thinking. You were either for the war or you were against the war. And if you were against the war, you were vocal about it. Even John Kerry, when he came back from Vietnam, was at some mass demonstration in Washington, D.C., throwing his medals into the Potomac.
What was your thought process while you were in college? Because, I know when I went to college, it was like, okay, I'm going to be... So I went to two different schools. I got my associates at Cobleskill and my bachelor's at Cortland. But all throughout that, my main mindset was, okay, I'm going to graduate from college and then get a job in the field that I want to get a job in. You're going to school to, have a career when you were going to college, but you had that barrier of the military that was hanging over your head that you knew you had to go to after college. So how did you balance trying to focus on a career you were interested in, knowing that it was going to have to be on hold anyway by going to your service?
Well, again, I really didn't think about it. It wasn't until after I graduated from college, I had an academic job. I worked at Hunter College, the college I got my bachelor's degree from, and I worked in the science lab. But I knew that I had to start thinking about being drafted, because at that point I wasn't a teacher. I ultimately became a teacher, but at that point I was not.
Yep.
So, and to be honest, I was very ambivalent about the war. To be honest, in one way it was sounds kind of silly, but it was like an exciting thing. I don't know, be in uniform, and I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I wasn't petrified of it. And ultimately I went into the Air Force, and I didn't become, a ground soldier. I don't want to get too much into the whole Vietnam thing. I'm a veteran. And I thank you for coming to the veteran barbecues with me, which is which which I liked. That my kids respected me for that.
Of course.
And I'm going back in time now to, you had asked my growing up how it influenced bringing up my kids.
Yeah.
As you're going through that now, bringing up your own family. I think we're a product of how we were brought up. You know that we brought you up to be very independent.
Mm-hmm.
When I say you, I mean you and your siblings.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't feel any peer pressure from other parents, like crossing the street. I mean, you guys were crossing the street here at 5, 6 years old, and once we knew that you knew to always, it's not like we live on a busy street.
Yeah.
But again, other parents would come up and ask us, well, why do you let them cross the street? I say, well, we look out the window, but we know that they can do it on their own.
It also, let me just throw in a bone there. It also took a couple getting lost in theme parks and dropped out of cars to, help me get that independence. But that comes with allowing us to, explore and to, try things. And you hope someone doesn't end tragically, but you need to get lost one time. You need to, lose your parents to grow and figure out, how do I get out of this situation?
That is so true. And we never, after the divorce, and I would be dating women,
Mm-hmm.
And you guys were young, I got divorced when you guys were very young. And raising 3 kids, I mean, Jed, and you guys went back and forth between mom and me. But, a woman would ask me, how can you bring up 3 teenagers so close in age? This is when you were 12 or 13. Mm-hmm. Davina was 14 and a half. And I would look at them and I'd say, I can't think of one day that I had an issue with you guys. I mean, there were small little things,
mm-hmm.
But Davina never came home with green hair, with things hanging out of her nose.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. We have listeners.
No, everybody's entitled. Right.
Yeah.
I'm just talking my perception of, I don't know how I would have handled it, but it never came to pass.
Uh-huh.
Kudos to everybody else who, does those things. And it was, whenever I see Nick's
mm-hmm.
laughing and smiling, that's how I see my family growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Because we never created a situation that they were not happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think happy kids make for happy adults.
Yeah.
And, drugs was never an issue. So we kind of had it easy. Mm-hmm. We had 3 kids who kind of knew their boundaries. Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone strays and experiments, but by and large, I can honestly say I never had a day where I was pulling my hair out.
So let me ask you a question. How because I see the the cost in having one kid now. I still it still boggles my mind how we went through life as kids. You as parents, I mean, you were a hardworking teacher. You made a decent salary. Mom worked and she had a okay salary, but I don't know whatever else she made. But 3 kids is expensive, and someone like me, I want to go to a Yankee game. I want to go to Disney World. So I remember our epic drives down to Florida, which I have on my list of things to talk about. But how would you balance, getting me a new Tamagotchi that I wanted, or going to a Yankee game? It's tough. So what is there a priority list you have to set where it's like, okay, we'll get it during Hanukkah or Christmas? How does someone have a big family nowadays with the expense, with the way things are?
Nowadays is the key.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you guys were growing up, things simply were just not that expensive.
Uh-huh.
We can go to a Yankee game and not have to mortgage the house.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Now 2 parents have to work.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, my mother didn't work for many years. She was the traditional housewife.
Yeah.
I think later on she may have had a part-time job.
Mm-hmm.
I kid you guys when I say I would be a millionaire today if I didn't have 3 kids. If I didn't have kids, I probably would be a millionaire. And I'm not being facetious. Forgetting buying things, just the normal
Food and
expense of
clothing.
growing up.
Yeah. Oh, not
Right.
everybody. Yeah.
But today, I think it's a big issue about how someone can raise not only one kid, but in my case, 3 kids. But we did it, and I think a big part because you guys never asked for big things. You guys never were happy with whatever. We'd buy you a Tamagotchi.
We would get the Bronx version Tamagotchi. We would get
Right.
a Tamagotchi.
The knockoffs.
Yeah, we get a
Yeah.
Tamagotchi. Oh,
The one I bought on Canal Street.
yeah, exactly.
So I don't think we ever had an Xbox, or I don't even know. We remember we had that little.
We had a
gizmo
Super
that looked up.
Nintendo that you left in your closet one Hanukkah that me and Jed scoped out before you gave it to us and sort of ruined the surprise. But
I don't remember that. But even our vacations, I mean, we'd go to Florida, and we drove to Florida. I mean, to fly with 3 people, would have been prohibitive. But
and this is something I'm sort of fascinated about too. And I spoke to Molly about this also. Now that we have the internet readily available at our fingertips, we can map out a road trip to Florida, and we can put restaurants we saw from TV shows on the route, and we could stop at good hotels that we know are in safe neighborhoods. How did you know on these road trips where we were going to be stopping? What hotels we were going to be staying at that were in safe neighborhoods, or how would you map out this whole big road trip? Because
well, it was simple. Driving to Florida, we drove straight through.
Yeah,
So we didn't have to. We only stopped to eat.
true.
And we'd always stop to eat where the buffets were, if you remember that.
Yep.
Remember we stopped at a place where it was eat all the ribs or something, and they actually told Jed he couldn't eat anymore.
Yeah, it was the Tony Roma's, and they had
Tony Roma's,
all you can eat ribs. And my brother, I didn't really get into this with him in our chat, but he can put it away, and you could never tell because he is the most lean and he is the most fit and perfectly shaped body human being you want to see. He's like a Hercules. But if you give him meat and a bone, he's a caveman, and he will just eat and eat and eat and eat. So the
He's an eating
restaurant,
machine. He's an eating machine.
they advertised the all-you-can-eat buffet, all-you-can-eat ribs, and they just kept bringing them out because he kept eating them. And at one point, the server came over to the table and said, I'm sorry, you guys can't share this food. It's for one person. And literally said, I'm the only one eating. So then they started to bring it out in increments of half an hour. It started to take forever, but...
Well, we did travel. We traveled a lot, but a lot of it was in our station wagon. I always had a station wagon.
Yeah.
And we always had the VCR videotapes that we'd set up in the back.
Well, you'd hook it up to the cigarette lighter, right? So cars
Right.
used to have... For people that are listening, it's probably a lot of young listeners, but they don't even know that cars used to have cigarette lighters in them because cigarette smoking was such a common thing for people. I mean, something...
Well, the cars do have power outlets, though, that look like cigarette lighters.
Yeah, but it would be... I mean, it seems pretty unsafe. What used to be in a car, you would plug it in, and it would literally, it would burn up like a stove, and you'd put it on your cigarette. And it's just coming back to my memory now, but people probably have no concept of that. And
cars don't come with them anymore, I don't think.
Was that because cigarette smoking was so, widespread?
Oh, are you serious? On TV, everybody was smoking.
Yeah.
Even the Lucille Ball show, everybody smoked. Doctors would be on TV advertising cigarettes.
Really?
Doctors.
Really?
I remember there was some doctor who was advertising Camel cigarettes, which grows hair on your chest besides giving you cancer.
You keep leaning into the computer when you do that.
You see my hands? I can't.
No, when you do your little forward motion there.
Oh, I'm getting you seasick.
Yeah. But what? So I'm curious about cigarette smoking a little bit because you were at one point a cigarette smoker.
Oh yeah.
And this was something that my brother Jed he actively would try and get you to stop. I sometimes would come in, and you had a little bit more lenient approach with Jed as you gave him a little more leeway to push your buttons on it. I remember one time I tried to come into your room. I think I saw a carton or a pack of cigarettes on your shelf, and I don't know what I did. I think I put him in the garbage or threw him in the garbage, and I have a weird memory of you just getting really mad at me. And I thought to
Oh,
myself, like, you wouldn't have got this mad at Jed for doing that. But what was it with cigarette smoking? Because, like you say, something that me, Jed, and Davina, it was something that we never picked up, and maybe it was because we saw you smoking or something like that. And how did you pick it up? Was it in the Air Force, or was it just?
no, no, no. It was before. I don't know. It started when I was in high school,
Oh, okay.
actually. I don't really remember exactly, but 99% of people smoked.
Yeah.
Your mother was one of the rare ones, and Ivy,
Hmm.
Donna's sister, who never smoked.
Yeah.
And in those days, that was unusual. And Arnie too.
Hmm.
That and Murray was a heavy smoker,
Hmm.
and
My
Minnie was a
grandfather.
smoker, but
Yep.
yet all three of their kids were not.
Hmm.
So that's very unusual.
Yeah.
My parents smoked. I mean, my father smoked. My mother smoked. My mother had stopped smoking years before she died.
Hmm.
I think my father was a smoker up until a couple of years before he passed away.
Yeah.
And this was something that always bothered me because was so addictive. Jed would really get upset.
Yeah.
Jed was living with me, and I'd always try to hide it from him, but
Hmm.
you can't hide it.
No.
He once saw ashes in the drain in the sink, and
Yeah.
and he like laid out the riot act to me. He says, "Dad, don't force me out of this house if you're going to continue smoking."
Hmm.
And I remember I sat at the computer. I had an old Commodore 64 at the time. And I wrote him a letter, and I said, Jed, my heart is absolutely broken
Hmm.
with what you said to me about, maybe leaving the house because of the smoking. And it had a big impact on me.
Hmm.
And at that point, I think I had stopped smoking within a year.
Hmm.
And it's now 14 years since I've had a cigarette.
Yeah.
But in those days, many, many people smoked. And I'm thankful that you guys never got involved with it or drugs.
Yeah.
And,
It's something that's interesting because I mean, like we go to restaurants now and you don't even think about it, but it used to be smoking section, non-smoking section,
on
or
airplanes. You can
oh
smoke on an airplane.
yeah, yeah, it's
Can you imagine that?
I can't imagine that. But yeah, so something that I realized as a kid, and maybe I don't know if you did as a kid, but was there ever any trying to impress your parents? Because something that I've always tried to do as a kid is impress you guys, and whether it's with the YouTube channel or going to college or doing that, like, did you ever need to impress your parents? And did you ever because I don't, and this is something as you as a parent, and I'm not saying this in a bad way. We've always given each other hugs and kisses, and not that I need it, but it's always like I never got like a "you're doing a great job" or this and that. Like you say that stuff, but maybe there isn't a moment that you need to do or say. But did you ever try to impress your parents to a point that you needed?
Yeah, that's really a good question. I'm trying to think of, I, to be honest, I can't think of situations where I actually was doing things to impress my parents.
Mhm.
I enjoyed when they acknowledged me for something, like if I did well in a little league game. In those days, parents didn't come to games because they were always working. But no,
And
I
maybe
don't
there isn't
remember.
like a thing that you had to do, and I think something that I appreciate about you is that like you never felt we needed that because we were doing our own thing, and kids out there who get that from their parents all the time might not necessarily appreciate it as much as when you did say you're doing a great job or something like that. So I don't know. I think I'm giving you a backhanded compliment here. So just
A backhanded what?
compliment.
Well, no, listen, I don't think I ever missed
Hmm.
any game that you guys were, because being a teacher,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I was able to go to Jed's wrestling matches
Yeah.
because they were after school. And I always felt that I needed to be there to root you guys on. That's the way I saw it.
Well, something that's funny for people that don't know you, and I mean, I think I could say this now, but I think you are one of the old dinosaurs that have held on to either AOL or AIM for as long as it possibly could, and I think it's finally dead now. So I'm gonna. Your old screen name used to be Mr. Mom 23
That's right.
because I mean I give you so much credit, and Mom is awesome, and our stepfather Gary was very helpful too, and in bringing us up. But you carried so much on your shoulder of making dinner and making sure we were ready for bed and making sure we got to practices and making sure we did our homework and making sure everything was settled in our apartment. So that's transitioning me into the AOL times there. How did you sort of see, because you mentioned your profession a little bit before, and you started off as a science teacher but then transitioned into a computer teacher. So you were one of the ones of people who I guess were a little more educated on the internet era. But how did the internet sort of affect you? And the whole, I made a joke with Molly on Molly's Mind that we had every single AOL CD-ROM that used to come out because you used to get them, I don't know, from work or something like that. But it used to say 600 free hours on it. Or
Right.
how did the internet era affect you? And well, what advantages did you see from it initially? Why did you feel that you wanted to learn about computers? And why did you become involved in that world? What drew you to it?
Good question. I was always interested in gizmos and gadgets. So when computers first came out, I think the first one was really an Atari, but that
was
really
a video
didn't catch.
game system, right? Or was that?
I'm not sure. I think they also may have had like a very entry-level computer.
Okay.
Or it might have been another brand.
Okay.
But the really first home popular computer was the Commodore 64. And as soon as they had like 1 megabyte of memory, I mean, all it basically was a word processor. But I got it, and I got into it, and I would take it apart, and I looked. There wasn't even an internet then. But I was interested in the mechanics of it. And then as time progressed, I got interested in coding. I did some basic language coding.
Yep.
And you know the story how I got the computer job at the high school.
Not really.
Well, I was a science teacher.
Yep.
I taught earth science and chemistry. And I would always walk past the computer lab. It was a nice computer lab. Remember they had Apple computers?
Yeah, I remember going down there, yep.
Yeah, you were there, Apple IICs. And then in the back row, there were 8 IBM original PCs. They weighed about 100 pounds each. And no hard drives. They had dual disk drives. The 5¼ inch floppy disks. It was even before the 3.5-inch disks. And I'd walk past his room, and I'd see a whole class of students all busily working and looking at the screen and typing. And Ed, who was the computer teacher, would be sitting reading a newspaper. And every time I walked past my classroom, I'd say, God, what a damn job he's got. Almost as good as being a gym teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
When you throw out the basketball.
Yeah.
And say play.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for all the gym teachers out there that might be listening.
Phys ed teachers.
Phys ed teacher, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We called them gym teachers.
I know. Me too.
He was obese. He was a heavy guy, and I remember he went up to the principal, and Duke University in North Carolina had some sort of a rice program. That was the hot diet program of the day. And he was going to go down there and go on their rice diet program and lose 100 pounds or whatever. And at a
sounds pretty simple. It sounds like he could have just did that in New York. You got to go to Duke to learn to just eat rice.
Well, whatever, but it was a hot program at the time. And I remember at the faculty conference, the principal said, Ed is going to be leaving for a semester. Is there anyone here that knows anything about computers? Now, remember, no one knew about computers in these days.
Yeah, of course.
Although the Apple was becoming popular. But I was pretty computer literate. From my Commodore 64, I did some basic programming. As soon as he made that, I had my hand up before anybody else even got their hand off their desk. And I said, I know computers, and I'm fluent and literate. I know everything. And the principal said, all right, you got the job. And then I really built up a nice lab. As the technology progressed, I got grants to upgrade the lab,
Yep.
and it became a very successful state-of-the-art lab.
Yep.
And that's how I became a computer teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started my own business later on. The school actually sent me to take classes on how to fix computers.
Well, so whatever happened? Because I mean, that sounds like the famous story of Wally Pipp and I think it was Joe DiMaggio or Lou Gehrig or someone. Oh, Lou Gehrig possibly. Like Wally Pipp sat out one day, and then Lou Gehrig came in and took his position, and you were a teacher for I don't know 45, 50 years. Did he ever come back from his Rice program and say, "All right, Steve"?
Oh no, I got to finish the story.
Oh, okay.
I remember halfway through the semester, I'm really feeling good now.
Yep.
The controller, the person who was in charge of the finances, comes in and he says, "Steve, where is the IBM XT?" Now, the IBM XT was the first IBM computer that had a hard drive in it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it was a 30 megabyte hard drive. Now, that was big in those days. We're not talking 30 gigabytes. We're talking 30 megabytes.
Yeah.
And I said, "What XT? There's no XT here." He says, No, we bought Ed an XT. And it should be here someplace. Well, to make a long story short, Ed, when he went down to his North Carolina, he took the XT with him.
Really?
So they got.
That must have been a ginormous thing. How did he walk out of the freaking building with the computer, one that heavy and that big?
I don't know. He was the computer teacher.
Yeah, I guess they didn't question it.
Taking it home to do some work.
Yeah.
Whatever. But he really didn't deny it. I mean, how could he deny it? Unless he would flat out say that I stole it.
Yeah.
And he said, "No, I just took it figuring I would use it here to keep my skills up to date."
Yep.
Well, they didn't want any. They figured that he stole it.
Oh, wow.
So he never even came back.
Huh.
That's how I got that permanent position. Had he not stolen that XT, I'd still be, an earth science chemistry teacher.
So what's your take on how do you see, because you saw computers at pretty much its infantile stage, and now where it's at now, like we see you fidgeting with your earphones every 2 seconds. How do you?
Because they're falling out my ears.
How do you keep up with all of the, like, it changed so much, whereas
you read, you just read. There is so much on the internet. When I had my computer business, and after I retired, I was pretty active in it. Whenever a problem came up, I would go on the internet, and whatever problem I had, somebody else had that exact same problem, and it was on the internet.
Yeah.
And I solved every single problem ever by going on the internet. To this day, I still do it.
Yeah.
I have an issue with the car. I go on the internet and to see what the story is.
But is it almost a bad, like, could it almost be a bad thing that there's so much, stuff on the internet? Because I remember as a kid, we used to have bookshelves of, like, I think you had every World War II and every World War I book on there.
Still have it.
Yeah, still there. And we had encyclopedias.
We had an encyclopedia, yeah.
We had those geography magazines, the animal ones.
Right, National Geographic.
And you learned about stuff that way, and it sort of was cool in a way because it gave you some information, but it also gave you some play to, imagine a little bit. It says, here's a South African monkey. It does this, this, and this. And then you start thinking, well, maybe, and this isn't accurate, but you start, making up your own stories about this South African monkey. Whereas in the internet now, it's like, here's a South African monkey, here's what he eats, here's what he sleeps, here's his family traits.
No question about it. And if you want any more information, you click on the link.
Exactly.
That's invariably there. That's a good point. So you asked about whether it's good, whether the internet is good. It's good and bad. I mean, you can learn how to make bombs on the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of nefarious things go on the internet. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the other side of it, I mean, where can you get anything? You do it on the internet. Yeah. Any piece of information is on the internet. Remember, we used to go to trivia all the time, and what would be the thing that raised my blood pressure when we
did cell phones
trivia? People cheating with cell phones.
Yeah.
In 2 seconds, they put in the question and they get the answer, and it would drive me crazy. that's what the internet is. It's the most amazing thing. I mean, you know, growing up in a million years, you would have never thought that this could be.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the businesses that went out of business because of it. You know,
I'd be very
there's no more.
curious to see, you know, and obviously you can never do it, but you know, and I'm raising my daughter now in an age where internet is, you know, humongous. But when we were growing up, there was no internet. You know, we were sort of growing up at a time when we were a teenager, when, you know, there was AOL a little bit, but we still had the original traits like you had. We would play outside until it got dark, and then we came in, and then maybe we'd get an hour of internet time or something like that. It's scary, but it's also, you know, it's also cool in a sense that parents are at a stage right now where it's sort of carving their own path on what kids, you know, what they're allowing their kids, you know. There's conversations of when can they get a cell phone or when can they start using the internet, because to your point, the internet's great because they can find all the information they need, but then there's also a lot of bad stuff on the internet. There's, you know, scary people that are luring them to a mall or something like that. So it's an interesting balance, and it's not really something that I can go to you and I can ask your opinion on, you know, hey, how did you deal with us as a kid? You know, what time would you call us in from outside? But kids can't really go to their parents and say, hey, how much internet should I be giving my kid? So it's sort of like we're lost in this world of figuring it out for ourselves, but also getting looked at by the older generation saying, oh, these parents now let their kids use their phones whenever the hell they want, or they go to the grocery store and kids crying and they gives them their phone. So it's almost like, you know, parents or the older generation, and that's how we started this conversation, should have a little bit more leniency towards the younger generation, because we are still figuring it out, because we're growing up in a time where stuff is moving so damn fast.
It's very true. I mean, technology is going so fast that the law, for instance, can't even keep up with it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there are court cases that have no precedent because the technology has gone so fast.
Yeah.
But I want to digress for a minute and talk about the influence that the parent has on the child.
Mm-hmm.
We always wanted you guys to pursue your own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I always liked the idea of you guys going to college. Mm-hmm. But if you were to say to me, or Davina or Jed were to say to me, Dad, I want to do something else. I don't want to go to college. I would probably have said, well, why? Explored it, and then not have gone crazy and insisted. And I think back to my childhood, that I didn't have that luxury of being able to discuss what I wanted. Mm-hmm. What I really wanted to do is, I had a good friend. Mm-hmm. I remember his name is Danny. Mm-hmm. We played violin together in the orchestra in high school. And he was a Jewish boy like me.
Yep.
And his father was a deputy inspector in the New York City Police Department. And I said to Danny, I said, how did your father, a nice Jewish boy, become a cop? He says, well, in my father's case, it was during the Depression. He was actually a pharmacist, but he couldn't get a job. So like a lot of people, you try to get a civil service job that had a salary and had security. And he became a cop. Mm-hmm. And he was a smart guy, and he went through the ranks. Became a sergeant, became a lieutenant, became a captain. And anything over captain, up to captain, are tests. Beyond captain are appointments, mm-hmm. By the mayor or whatever. And to be honest, I always entertained the thought of being a cop. Mm-hmm. It was just something I couldn't even imagine approaching my parents. I couldn't even imagine it. Saying to my father or to my mother, I really don't want to go to college, but I really want to take the police test and make it a career. My father would have had a heart attack, and my mother would have had a stroke just hearing those words. So, of course, I went on to college.
But you say that, like, do you genuinely, yes. Deep down in your heart, if you yes. said that, and what happens? They don't talk to you? I mean, like, there's no they'll get over it type of phase, you don't think?
It's just a matter if you don't want to create a situation where they don't respect you or like you anymore.
Yeah.
It's just something that was out of the realm of being able to wrap my head around, even discussing it with them.
Could you almost like compare it to, and maybe it's not as drastic, but some Indian families or something like that, or their parents will require them, or strongly pursue them to be a doctor or something like that. And there's a comedian now. Forgot what movies he's in, but his parents wanted him to be a doctor when they came to America, and he became a comedian. And it was almost like they wouldn't talk to him, or they disowned him, or if they did meet with him, the parents were very put their head down. And is it almost? Could you compare it to that, or is it like?
No, I think that's
a little extreme.
Yeah, that's a little. I don't think my parents would disown me.
Mm-hmm.
Very orthodox Jewish people in the day. I don't know if it's still true today, but if you married outside of your religion, you were what's called you're dead to them.
Yeah, I mean,
dead in the figuratively sense.
Of course.
And they actually would say Kaddish, the prayer for the dead, and that was it. You're no longer in the family. No, I can't imagine my parents having done that. But I know every time they would look at me, they would say, the Yiddish word is shanda. They would say, what is shanda? He didn't go to college. Or what is shanda? That he's a cop. In those days, every Jewish parent wanted their kid to be a lawyer or a doctor.
Yeah.
But if you couldn't, you went to college anyway.
Uh-huh.
I made it a point that I never, when you guys were growing up, would ever put a pressure on you guys to do something that I wanted you to do, rather than just going with what you guys truly wanted to do.
And that was because you realized,
yes.
You as a kid, and you saw yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. That had the influence on me not to create that kind of an atmosphere that my kids would grow up in.
I wonder why it's I don't know what it is related to, but how you can realize that so fast that you realize, okay, when I have kids, I'm going to be the exact opposite. If they want to do no school, I'll allow it. Whereas other ethnicities or nationalities, whatever, one becomes a doctor, they have kids, and then they force them to become a doctor, and it's almost like they don't realize, my parents put so much stress on me to become a damn doctor that when I have kids, they can do whatever the hell they want. And it keeps getting passed down from tradition to tradition to tradition. And it still to today you see it. I don't know if that's just the individual person, or if it's just, the cultures in general being stronger,
I think it's just the kids become inculcated with their parents' values. I don't even think it becomes conscious for them.
Yeah.
It was like when I was growing up, it was just accepted that I go to college. It wasn't even a matter of discussion.
Yeah.
You graduate from high school, you go to college. You don't talk about that. That's just the way it is.
I think you almost also take on the level of, I don't know the right word. So we were always brought up Reform Jewish, so we would go to the temple on the high holidays, and we were sort of lax about it. But maybe if you guys were super Orthodox and we were going to temple every weekend and we were doing Shabbat dinners and all this stuff, maybe we would be more super Orthodox. So it's almost like, in a way, you sort of take on the persona of your parents.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm sort of going against what I just argued, but...
Yeah, it is. What I think the point that I was trying to make is, because of my upbringing, I was very cognizant of not creating an atmosphere where my kids would ever feel pressured in any way. All we knew was that we were not going to burden you guys with a lot of debt. It was very important for us. See, my parents didn't have that problem because my bachelor's degree, I went for free. When I did my undergraduate work, I went to this Hunter College, which was part of the city university,
Yeah.
that had 5 senior colleges that were all free, totally free. But when you guys went to school, we worked it out where we would try not to. Of course, you guys helped us out. I mean, Davina was an RA for a while. Jed was an RA for a while. So it all helped where you guys graduated and, you didn't have this heavy, I think that was very important for us, not to saddle you with that.
Yeah.
But all I can say, I don't know if there are parents that follow, Corin's world.
Maybe.
But, I think parents very often get caught up in what they live their life through their kids. Now, to an extent, that's true. I mean, when you guys, I kvel for you guys. That's again a Yiddish word that means, you just get overwhelmed with how proud you are of something. That's what kvelling means. I mean, and when you set a goal and you do it, you set a goal. You were going to finish college. You finished college. Jed finished college. How he helped his own finances, cutting hair and whatnot. All of these things made me so proud that everyone becomes independent. And now that you're raising your own families, to keep these things and pass those values onto your kids.
So what's your take on, and I'm going to switch the topic a little bit, but you say, and this is not something you had to think about it, because luckily 3 of your kids are, I'll brag for me, Jed and Davina here, but pretty bright enough to fall under the right political spectrum where we can, respect, someone like a Bernie Sanders or, even a Joe Biden or Elizabeth Warren, who have these good policies that help everybody and, is free college. But how do you think, what if one of us said, I support what Donald Trump's talking about? He's got some good policies.
Stop giving me nightmares, Corin. Stop giving me nightmares.
I mean, it's a sort of a stupid question because none of us do, but would you disown us? Would you still talk to us?
It's a valid question. And I'm sure there are situations where people do have that kind of conflict. I'm sure there are families. Well, to be honest, I can't think. I'm not going to name the family, but there is a family that very well that has that exact situation.
Yeah.
Where one of the family members is a die-hard Trump person, and the rest of the family are more progressive. But again, never to be disowned about it.
Yeah.
But what happens is you just don't talk about it.
Exactly.
And, there's just some things that are taboo. You don't talk about it, and you let your blood pressure remain low.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've always had high blood pressure, and one thing that would always we'd always get a kick out of it was when we go to Thanksgiving at your brother's house, and we have a cousin, or I don't know, it was a cousin's cousin on the other side of the family, but she'd always be that type of person that would have the opposite take of whatever argument you're making. So, you say the sky is blue, she'd say, no, it looked orange, and
yeah, and I don't handle that well.
You don't handle that well. So this is sort of back to your childhood again, but how do you think you developed, and you don't really have that much of a temper, but you do get riled up from time to time. Where does that stem from?
I do.
What do you like? Where does that come from?
I don't know. So I don't know. I do have a temper, but I'm able to control it. It doesn't get out of hand. I mean, I remember situations with you where. Hold on, let me see if I can find my water bottle. There it is.
Crotch shot.
Okay, I'm back. Where I remember you knew how to push my buttons, but of course, I never destroyed the house.
Yeah.
With my temper. But I do have a temper. Where it comes from, you ask? I don't know. I think we're hardwired that way. I don't think it's a learned behavior.
Yeah.
My brother is exactly the same way. I remember instances, back in the Bronx, when I was in the bathroom too long. My brother wanted to go to the bathroom, and he went crazy, and he literally kicked in the door.
Yeah.
And it scared me. I mean, he had a killer look in his eyes, but literally kicked down the door.
Lower the laptop a little bit. It's a little high. The camera. There you go. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is a conversation I had with Molly too. Is what is, that old conversation of nature versus nurture? Like, did your father have a temper and you picked it up there, or like were you born with a temper? And how much I try to be funny around Nix. I try to joke around, but it's like, how much of that is she really picking up? Is she just her own person when she's born? Did you ever have a take on that as a kid?
You got to be careful. It's a good point. You got to be careful. Kids are like sponges.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they pick up things that you probably aren't even aware of.
Yeah.
So I think in certain ways, it reminds me of being a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I just give a little anecdote where I call in a parent because the kid constantly was cursing at me. Always every other word was an F word or S word, whatever. And a parent would say to me, "Oh, I'll take care of that little fucker tonight."
Yeah.
And so kids do learn from their parents.
Yeah.
So you have to. But as far as the temper goes, I remember my father, very laid back, mild mannered guy. But I do remember a couple of instances where he literally lost it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a hard wire.
Yeah.
But certainly certain behaviors are definitely learned.
Yeah. I mean, I look at you and Mom, and I've always seen you, and you're my father. I think I know you pretty well, but I've always seen you as more, stern or more, serious. But you're very funny, But it comes in, like subtle ways, or something like that. Whereas Mom, I see her as, more like me. She's comical, she's on the surface, more, outgoing or something like that. And then I see someone like Davina, and I sort of see her more like you. She's very funny, but she'll throw her jokes in a backwards way or something like that.
Right.
So, and again, I don't know if that's just how we're born, but it's interesting to see that dynamic in families where, I think you and Mom had a great, like, yin and yang, whereas you were more serious, she was more funny, and I think as kids we picked that up on either side, with other families, like I said, I think it's interesting to see kids develop and which parents' persona do they take on more,
It's very true. Just know that how you and Molly act
mm-hmm.
around Nix is being observed.
Yeah.
So you certainly don't want to have behaviors that are negative behaviors.
Yeah.
In Mom's case, she's naturally witty. She always was very witty.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she got that from Murray. Murray was kind
mm-hmm.
of a funny guy.
Mm-hmm.
But kids pick up from their parents. The temper, I'm not sure whether that's nature or nurture.
Uh-huh. One thing I want to ask about, and did you have any more thoughts on that? Sorry if I'm cutting you off.
No.
And this might raise your blood pressure a little bit, but something when we used to take our road trips down to Florida was we used to have these old cassettes, and we used to listen to your 50s, your 60s music, and we used to love it, and I still appreciate that today because I could put on Sirius XM radio, put on 50s station or 60s station, and sing along to pretty much all of the songs that come on.
And you don't know how happy that makes me.
So, to that point, you hear music now, and it's got to be like your ears are burning. So what? Because you're a big music guy.
What a great question. And let me elaborate on this for a minute.
Okay.
The music that I grew up with, as you know,
mm-hmm.
tells stories.
Mm-hmm.
Usually love. 99.9% it's something love.
Yeah.
And you can follow the lyrics. Mm-hmm. You know what they're singing. You know what they're saying. And it wasn't much electrified. I mean, it was kind of natural music and natural singing. Mm-hmm. What I don't get about today's music is talent really isn't that important. The showmanship is what's important.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see some of these groups, it is so electrified with even their voices are, enhanced and modified, and the music, a lot of it is synthesized.
Yeah. Or the beat is really
And
good, but yeah.
right, some of the music, the beat, I'll tap my foot.
Yeah, no,
But
I'm saying the beat is good, but the singing is atrocious.
I don't know what they're saying.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no clue what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, every generation is different. I mean, the music from the 20s, is different than the music from the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly the music from the 50s and 60s is the best.
So
there's no question about that.
when you were a kid, so there wasn't really too much. I mean, I guess there was like flashiness, or it wasn't as much as it is today. Because I have a memory of like a Walt Clyde Frazier putting on a fur coat and like a hat, one of those fedora hats.
Right. Or the bling.
Oh yeah, the bling. But he's and I wasn't back in that time, but he sort of stands out among the crowd more than people do today. Whereas everybody's trying to be outrageous and bright colors and this and that.
Right. Well, in my day, it wasn't a matter of standing out. It was a matter of being the same. It's a big distinction.
Being what?
Being the same.
Oh, okay.
Look at them.
Yeah.
Look at Saturday Night Fever, or look at Grease.
Yep.
All the guys had the exact same haircuts.
Yeah.
They had the pompadour and the ducktail.
Yeah.
Which I had. Oops.
Yeah.
Which I had.
Uh-huh.
Black leather jackets.
Yeah. Jeans and some Converse or something.
Jeans, shorter jeans with white socks.
Yeah.
And if it was a T-shirt, you had the pack of cigarettes rolled up. When we were in high school.
Yeah.
And sometimes you would put rabbit's feet hanging from your leather jacket.
Oh man.
This pink colored or different colored rabbit's foots.
Yeah.
On a black leather jacket. There was a stage that I went through where you would wear a garrison belt. Mm-hmm. A garrison belt was a very thick belt with a buckle that could be used as a weapon. You could take it off and wrap it around your hand.
Yeah.
But we used to decorate them with car logos. We would walk around cars, and in those days, or even now, I guess cars have them. Cadillac would have the Cadillac logo.
Yeah.
And we would take a screwdriver and pry it off the car.
Uh-huh.
And I remember Chevrolet.
So that's why my Cadillac thing is missing on my car, right?
Well, you don't have a Cadillac.
I'm joking.
And we would put those logos, those metal logos, on our garrison belt. So everyone looked the same. There was you didn't wear to stand out from the crowd. You wore to fit into the crowd.
And what would happen if you went to high school, and this is something I prided myself on in high school, is I always had spiked hair, and but I always would wear sweatpants, a white t-shirt, and some flip-flops. And I wasn't wearing either, like when I was in high school, Affliction shirts were popular, or there was always different fads. And I try to take pride in not being a part of any of those fads because I wasn't like everybody else. Do you remember any kids that, were like, I'm not wearing the leather jacket and the jeans and putting the cigarette in my Were there any?
They were picked on. They were the nerds. They
really?
were the equivalent of the nerds. Yeah, everyone had to conform. Mm-hmm. I guess nowadays people are outrageous because they want to be different. Mm-hmm. Spiked orange hair.
And people are more accepting now too, whereas back in the days.
Well, that's why they can do it.
Yeah.
They could have not done it in my day.
Yeah.
But now it is accepted to be different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all the inking. I mean, you did not see that when I was growing up.
Yeah.
You didn't see ring noses.
Yeah, big mustaches.
Certainly, you didn't see men with earrings.
Yeah.
I mean, then you would really be picked on.
Yeah.
But then that evolved to the one earring. If you were not gay, was the right ear. Mm-hmm. Whatever. Until it morphed to it's okay to wear both earrings.
Yeah. So I'm gonna end it on this because we have a lot more to talk about, and I definitely want you back on another chat when you can figure out how to put some earphones in your ears and
Yeah, I'm going to wear headphones the next time. I
um,
have small ears, and big ears.
but what's your take on and I didn't want to get into Donald Trump too much because I didn't want your blood pressure to go too high up. But so I'll ask a broad question. What do you think? Where do you think we are right now? Do you think we're on a trending upward path with him maybe potentially getting out of office? Where do you see us as a country? Knowing where you were as a kid to a middle-aged man to a parent and now sort of an elder grandfather, are we in a good spot or does not look good for us?
It's a tough question. I think I don't think we're on the upturn.
Hmm.
I can't remember any time in my life that I was more pessimistic about what is not only happening in this country,
Hmm.
but what's happening in the world in general.
Yeah,
I know I have children, I have grandchildren, and I try not to be pessimistic,
yeah,
but I can't see unless there's going to be a sharp turnaround. I'm not even talking about global warming. I'm talking about human decency. Human decency seems to be disappearing from the world.
yeah,
When you just look around the world, well, I mean, look at Sri Lanka. Look at the synagogue shootings, all of the hate. There is so much hate in the world, and I don't see it subsiding. I see it getting worse.
yeah,
And that's not Trump. I mean, in this country, Trump may have exacerbated the hate that's already been there. You could argue that. But on a worldwide basis, in this country, I don't see it improving. Just look at our government,
yeah.
how there is no government
I
in
know.
actuality.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I hate to end on that kind of a note,
No, it's
and I hope that it can turn around.
yeah. I agree. I hope it can turn around, and I hope
And
that it
it's up to
does.
you guys.
Yeah,
It's up to you guys and your kids to do it.
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't want to end on that note either. I want to end on a positive note. Is there anything else you feel you want to add, or anything that you feel we missed that maybe we could touch upon next time, or something? Any other parting
Well,
notes?
I just want to end it on that there is hope, because I am sure I know my three kids and how they're going to contribute to society,
Yeah,
and my grandkids will, and I'm sure there are millions of others that are in the same mindset as you guys. So as pessimistic as I sound, there's the other side of the coin, that when I look at you guys, that it is uplifting.
cool.
So there is hope.
Good. Okay. Well, we're gonna start a fund for you for some headphones for next time. We're gonna
Thanks.
get you seated in your seat comfortably with some pillows behind you.
Yes, I need it.
But Dad, thank you, thank you. I enjoyed this, and I appreciate you talking, and thank you. And I
Okay, good
love you.
night. I love you guys. Good night.
Okay, bye, Dad.